But if you rehearse that plan, if you built those relationships, if you've done those reconnaissance, the 3 R's, then I think you're going to be much better off, much more effective in a much quicker manner.
Welcome to the 1CA podcast. This is your host, Jack Gaines. Today, we have a very special guest, retired Brigadier General Chris Stockel.
LC38brand.com, the civil affairs lifestyle brand. A little bit of something for everybody. T-shirts, polos, shorts, hats, flags and posters for your walls, and stickers for everything else. Celebrating the heritage of civil affairs from the civil reconnaissance of Lewis and Clark through the monuments men of World War II and companies of Vietnam. Representing the present themes of the global war on terror, we have items for citizen soldiers of USACAPOC and warrior diplomats at Fort Bragg alike. LC38brand.com. It's cool to like your job.
Welcome back. Brigadier General Chris Stockel held various command positions in the Infantry, Special Forces, and Civil Affairs. His last position was Commanding General of the 351 Civil Affairs Command out of Mountain View, California. Additionally, he was the Senior Civil Affairs Advisor within the INDOPACOM AOR, which included synchronizing almost all the CAA soldiers within the region. Prior to that, BG Stockel did a position with the State Department Counter-Terrorism Bureau, spoke at the Council on Foreign Relations on China, and testified before Congress to the House Committee on State and Foreign Operations about Iraq. Chris Stockel has a Bachelor's of Arts in Mathematics and Computer Science from Trent State, a Master's in Strategic Studies from the Army War College, and is now the Vice President of the Civil Affairs Association, a proud sponsor of this show. He is also enjoying his retirement and living with his family out of New Jersey. BG Stockel, welcome to 1CA Podcast.
Well, Jack, thanks for that kind introduction. When I first started thinking about security cooperation, I was an infantry officer, then special forces, then civil affairs, and so the nexus at that captain major level really started getting me to think about the big picture. And so when I was at Special Operations Command Europe, it made me think, wow, that this thing is huge. How can these activities be synchronized? And when I think security cooperation, I immediately think the Defense Security Cooperation Agency. But then my experience with them has to do with Overseas Humanitarian Disaster and Civic Aid, ODACA. So it's much more than that, right? And so when I commanded the 351 Civil Affairs Command, we expanded the Civil Affairs Synchronization Working Group, right? So the CASWIG. And we got quite a few people interested in that because there was a recognition that civil affairs activities, to include ODACA that we just talked about, affects humans, in particular in the land domain. So I see a big nexus between security cooperation and civil affairs activities.
Did you see a gap in the past? Because you kind of skill stacked your 3 different types of experiences, and then it caused, all of that experience of working across different types of jobs, special forces, infantry. It allowed you to open up your aperture, and that's where the CASWIG and the HUMIC kind of fermented, right?
Absolutely, right? And so there's gaps in everything we do, right? And so identifying those gaps, relay them to other commanders, identifying the resources and the objectives and what that delta is defined as risk, and articulating that and recommending different course of action, some with more risk, some with less risk, especially when it comes to, what the Army is now calling the human dimension. I'm glad we've identified information and human dimensions of the various domains, but it's my feeling that domains get money and resources and funding and experimentation. I'm not sure dimensions do. And now, that's fresh out of the new Army Operations FM 3-0 just released last month. And so we'll see how that works out. But at least we know where we are. And so back to gaps, there were some gaps. And so I wanted to leverage as many partners as I could so that we were nesting ODACA with exercise-related construction, what type of folks we were sending on various overseas training to maximize effects and to understand. We use the term network a lot. There's nothing nefarious about it, but it's better to get to know people like the director of port operations and whatever in Busan now than it is when you're trying to RSO